Thank you very much, Henrik, for having me on here. It's an honor to be on here. Thank you.
As I mentioned there, The Age of Transitions, that's a film you've recently done and released on the web. And by the way, for everyone who wants to find out a bit more about Aaron, you can go to his YouTube profile where you can see a bit more of his audio clips and so forth. He doesn't have a complete website out there yet, but go to his YouTube account, simply youtube.com/ADDTV or ADTV, and check out some of the clips and so forth he has up there. And I think the entire film is available also on YouTube. Is that correct, Aaron?
Yes, yeah, it's in 9 parts on YouTube, and the entire thing's on Google.
Excellent. And, so obviously there's a whole lot of topics to talk about here today, but for, let's say for people that haven't seen the film yet and are listening here today, the concept, I guess, of the age of transitions, maybe you can just briefly tell us about that.
Well, the Age of Transitions, the title itself really says it all. We're going into a time where the human race itself is going through massive changes, or is going to be going through massive changes. You've got transition and transhuman. You're talking about transforming, going through a transition, transmutation. So you're talking about the change from human to post-human, which is this idea of creating cyborgs, adding different sort of technologies like brain chips, artificial intelligence, life extension, all these converging technologies, and what they mean to what it will be to be human here in this new world we're going into after the transitional phase, when we're into the new age, the new golden age, as it were. Or that's what we're being told it is. It's a golden age, and the human being is being transmuted, which is an interesting concept right there.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about some of the of your background, I guess, and how you kind of got interested, I guess, in some of these topics. It's always interesting to hear how people kind of get into it, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I'm just kind of a regular person. I was born in rural Pennsylvania. I went out to school to learn video in Columbus, Ohio. And while I was out there, my junior year, 9/11 happened, and I was in video class that day, actually. I think it was video 3 class, working on a video project. And everybody remembers that day and how surreal it was. It was the same for me. We were sitting around a TV, and I didn't really know what to think. And I didn't know what to think for years after that, actually. I was just kind of like in a daze. I was working hard while I was in school. I wasn't even really on the internet at all. And then quite a few years later, a good friend of mine came up to me and introduced me to Alex Jones and those sort of things. I started looking into 9/11 truth, and I realized the reality of 9/11 truth and all the bigger concepts that stem out from honest investigation, truth-seeking. And early on, I came across transhumanism. Like, when I first started looking into the 9/11 thing, I kind of came across transhumanism while I was just searching on the internet for stuff. I just kind of, like, by accident, I guess you would say, but I wouldn't say it is by accident. And I realized I knew about the population reduction things from listening to Alex Jones and whatnot, and then the transhumanists were talking about life extension. And that made me think, I'm like, well, how does this life extension kind of jive with the idea of population reduction? Because there's an obvious conflict of interest right there. So that got me thinking. And I ended up making some videos probably about 2 years after I was into all this truth-seeking. I started making some short videos that are up on YouTube now about transhumanism. And here we are today. I finally made this full-length feature, or I guess it's not, it's just a 1-hour documentary, really. It could be a TV program because it's 1 hour long. Mm-hmm. And it's just an attempt to, because the discussion on transhumanism, in my mind, is it's always lacking. It's always too one-sided. People are too general. They're not understanding where transhumanism came from, like what the word actually means, who made the word, where it came out of, because it came out of eugenics. Julian Huxley came up with the word itself, and that's often neglected. People just get caught up in this idea of, oh, we're going to turn into super intelligent cyborgs. We're going to have this technological utopia. We're going to live forever. Oh, boy, it's going to be great. But nobody, I mean, with that sort of thing, you just don't get utopia that easy. It doesn't. It comes with consequences.
Of course.
You can't have life extension. Life extension requires some sort of regulatory thing, because if everybody's living forever now, which they say that they can do, that living forever is a real possibility. So you have to regulate reproduction then. And when you understand that, that goes right in with all this population control stuff and the United Nations Agenda 21, things of this nature.
So, and what do you, I've heard, I think it is already great talking about some of the, as he described it, problems that comes along with the possibility of life extension, and he also mentioned this fact that if you choose to live, I guess, a certain amount of years above the norm, then I guess we can say you have to simply choose at that point not to have any kids. So the world doesn't, as you say, if we have a huge number of people on the planet, the question obviously arises, is that going to be sustainable? Is that even going to work? There's a whole lot of back and forth on that. But what do you see is the most kind of, I guess, dangerous aspect to all of this? Is it is it in relation to the the human soul, that we will lose a little bit of ourselves if we live forever? Or is this a more practical issue that we can't be so many people on the planet? Or do you see something else as a big danger here?
Well, yeah, all this stuff is inherent. I mean, it's just the problem when you build up this technological civilization. These are the problems that just inherently happen. And when it's basically man wanting to become a god and create the world the way that he sees fit. The idea of God being dead, so this is interesting philosophy that quite a few people adhere to, and then you believe God is dead, so man is a god, so he has the ability to create the world in the way that he wishes, and through technology he can actually become what he wants to be, and he himself becomes a god by becoming a creator himself and creating man into this new post-human ideal.
And is that a big danger as you see it? And if so, is that primarily because we lack the morals, or do you just think it's wrong to, in a way, then I guess take our own I don't know what to call it, future in our own hands, so to speak?
Well, I mean, we have to take our future in our own hands, but I mean, this is taking things to an extreme, and this is definitely dangerous.
And
yes.
If we talk a little bit about some of the background, you mentioned briefly eugenics, and this is something you discuss in your film as well, that the background to all of this lies in eugenics. And would you also connect with this the theory of evolution? I know that these two has been linked, so to speak, in the past, and do you think that is what has created a philosophy like this, that there's no boundaries basically, and we can, if we can do it, we're going to do it, right? Is that type of mentality here?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, like, if you can do it, then why not? That's basically the mindset here. And when you're talking about evolution, you're talking about survival of the fittest. And who are the fittest? And the fittest are the ones who are running everything. This is the philosophy that royals and people in power, the elite, this is the elite philosophy, that they are elite for a reason, and it's for a scientific reason. They got to the top because they are the fittest, and it's actually their obligation to us to see that society is run in the proper fashion. See, they're the administrators. They're the good shepherds that are steering us in the proper direction. And in their mind, if they weren't around, we wouldn't know what to do with ourselves, because we're just all chaotic, and we don't practice good breeding like they do. That's what positive eugenics is. See, they practice positive eugenics in that they breed with each other for very important reasons, like the arranged marriage sort of thing. Like, you take two people that have certain qualities, and then they breed, and their offspring is supposedly going to be superior. And oftentimes this is inbreeding too. This is why royal families are well known for inbreeding. Mm. And they'll do it to the end. I mean, they'll have tons of children that die from diseases because they're inbred, but they'll have like a couple that end up living, and supposedly these ones that end up living are superior. Mm-hmm. And that's just the fact that they go to such lengths when a normal person knows that inbreeding causes problems and it's not actually good to inbreed. It's just another aspect of the control freak mentality, having to have control over everything. Even like, if you don't wisely pick your partner, then your offspring is going to be terrible. So you have to take control of that. You have to know who you're breeding with, and otherwise you'll just have chaos. It'll be chaos. You got to have order. Very orderly. Yes.
So basically, what you're saying here is that this is an extension. The technology and the science behind this is an extension of an more older science, I guess, or a theory. And also, I've been wondering about that. You know, if all of this technology now has come about because of their, I guess, interest in controlling population. We can look at this from a perspective of social science or something like that. That we're becoming so many now. If you follow my train of thought here, we're becoming so many on the planet now that they need in some way to manage us. And I personally even see this whole technological grid of surveillance cameras, microchipping of populations. We have all kinds of control systems going into place, and this seems to be not the only agenda, of course, but one agenda of this is to be able to control the mass, that they should be more manageable. What do you think about that?
Oh yeah, that's a continuing theme with all this stuff. Like the reports, like the 2001 NBIC report that I put in the film Age of Transitions. They're talking. It's the National Science Foundation put it on. So we're talking about the U.S. government having this workshop with big-time people in the private sector and in government, people who are developing these sort of technologies, giving little presentations. And they are all saying that we need to be able to predict what everybody does. I mean, this is one of the key goals behind this technology. They talk over and over about being able to predict individuals, being able to understand what motivates groups, understanding what motivates people to rebel, understanding the motivations behind everything within society, tracking everything, and it's a recurrent theme. They talk over and over in all these reports. They talk about certain words like brain fingerprinting. Mm-hmm. So I mean, they'll do a little scan on your brain, and they can figure out beforehand if you're a criminal, and basically dealing with people before they even do something wrong, just based on this technology.
We're talking about basically pre-crime here that Philip K. Dick basically envisioned many years ago, and this is something that ties in, I guess, also with biometrics. They can read your body language. For instance, they've done trials on this, I think, on some airports now, where they install a whole system basically with an AI that observes everyone that is within the periphery of the CCTV system, basically. And they, as you say, they can track you, and they can basically know at that point if you're going, if you're someone who's going to, get on a plane and hijack it or whatnot. Apparently,
Yes.
we all should see how this works, of course. But and the question, that arises for me, obviously, is what the heck will happen with the society when that comes into place? Because the only thing that's not going to be, stopped here, so to speak, is not only the terrorists, sort of within quotes, obviously, but also you mentioned like the rebel spirit in children. Just today, I put up an article about the fact that they're tracking people in schools as young as 4 years of age. They're going to install CCTV cameras in the classrooms in order to again prevent, kids from behaving badly, so to speak. And what's your thought about that? What's going to happen with the society if that thing actually come into place and becomes global? What do you think will happen?
Well, yeah, it's all for our own good, though, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's all going to be good because, somebody acts up, you got to deal with them. And, what's the problem with getting rid of all the negative traits in everybody? And that's what this is all about, is getting rid of, even going to the extent of engineering these sort of traits out of the human being through the manipulation of DNA. That sort of stuff is being talked about too. Like, if we can get rid of negative things, why don't we just do it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I see something, incredibly scary in that, also from a kind of philosophical viewpoint. I think I listened to, and this might have been a bit tangent off here, but just to bring it into the context, I listened to, I think it was Joseph Campbell, the mythologist, the other day, who was talking about the fact that the rebel spirit, so to speak, within children is a vital and very important thing, even for a society, because what they manage to do is to go into an area which is kind of prohibited. It's not things that you shouldn't do. When children do that, they actually help to bring some new life force into the society or into the structure of the realm of the adults, and they help to, in that sense, renew society. They help to renew the system, the human system. But if we're prevented from doing that, I actually see a kind of a slow decay taking place at that point. I don't know. Do you have any theories or ideas about that at all?
Yeah. Well, I've been there. I've been the young rebel. I think we all have been. And yes, it absolutely is important to have kids just be kids. You know what I mean? Give them a chance to act wild. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I've been a kid. I've done some crazy things. I've done all kinds of crazy things. And they haven't always been good things either. I mean, I'm not perfect, but I'm glad that I had the ability to actually do them. Of course. Because, it does have a positive effect on society, as you say, in a strange, weird way. Like, we can't... by getting rid of things that sound like they're bad, you're not actually making things better. It's just the control freak mentality again, trying to know what's best and make the world. And it's just it doesn't work that way. Yeah. There's some things that you just can't predict everything. We're not meant to predict everything. We don't need to. Yeah, I see what you mean. Exactly. It's and again, it's the ultimate control of life, and that's, in that sense, I really see that this ambition to become God is becoming more and more prominent within that type of thinking. Because again, I also see this kind of omnipresent system building up, meaning that all the surveillance, all the the watchful eye in the sky, as it were, the eye of providence, or the eye on the dollar bill, that becomes a literal thing, and this entity or this system or this AI that's going to finally, I guess, oversee all the tracking and the controlling and the GPS navigation that's going to be linked up to the supercomputer, that becomes like a God entity in itself, and that becomes kind of interesting from a philosophical perspective. Don't know if you have anything to comment on that. Okay, we are continuing our conversation now from yesterday. Actually, we had a pretty severe computer crash here right in the middle of our conversation, but we managed to get it back up and running again.
So here we are. But it's pretty interesting, though, for the sake of our conversation, obviously, with all this talk of trying to merge humans with computers, which really is one of the cornerstones of the transhumanist movement. And, Aaron, considering that computers are still a pretty kind of lousy tool, they're a bit unreliable, I wonder if it ever is going to be possible for the transhumanists to achieve this goal. What do you think, Aaron?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. No technology is ever 100% effective or works right the way that you want it to every time. Just imagine if the computer that crashed yesterday was the computer that we uploaded our very consciousness into. What happens when you upload your very being into a computer and there happens to be a glitch in the computer or the computer shuts down or what have you? Exactly.
Probably going to lose it all, and that seems to, at least at this point, be very kind of an etheric concept, is very obscure concept to upload one's consciousness into one of these, a mainframe computer basically. But this is yet stuff that people like Anders Söderberg, for instance, is talking about. I think he's from Sweden originally. He's one of the professor at the university, I think, over in England right now. And there is one other guy. I think you brought these two guys up in your film, if I'm not mistaken. Anders is one of them, and then there's another guy. Do you remember who I'm referring to?
I can't remember specifically which individual talks about the uploading, but it's definitely a running theme. I know Nick Bostrom.
That's correct. That's what I'm thinking of. Yes.
Yeah. He's one of the co-chairs, one of the co-founders of the World Transhumanist Association. He talks about the idea of uploading all the time. So it's probably him. Yeah, and the World Transhumanist Association, that whole group is, you got to realize, it's basically a PR group, a public relations group for this idea of merging humanity with machines. Because at this point, most people, if you talk to most people on the street about how would you feel about putting a chip in your head and making yourself smarter, 9 out of 10 times somebody's going to say, no, that just sounds like a terrible idea. Like, I'd be a robot. They'd be able to control me. Things, the questions and concerns I'm bringing up in my film, The Age of Transitions, people naturally think of that because they're natural dangers. So over and over again, you hear this idea that attitudes have to be changed. When you read these government reports, they say that they recognize the fact that people aren't ready for this and that there is a necessity to ease people into this, to sort of go step by step. And it's funny, they mentioned Furbies in the NBIC report. They mentioned Furby as a harbinger of sort of the interaction between humanity and artificial intelligence and, sort of the humanizing of machines. As humanity itself becomes more like a machine, the machines ideally will become more human so that we accept them.
What is Furbies?
Yes, Furby. It's a little toy. It was I think it was one of the hot Christmas gifts one year. It's basically this little toy machine, weird-looking gremlin sort of thing, and you teach it. It's like one of those Tamagotchi pets. You teach it, and it learns language, and you interact with it.
Okay. So this is so exactly because they have to have some kind of plan, I guess, to desensitize people to this idea. Because on one level, I've always looked upon movies like The Terminator, for instance, and even The Matrix to be, they're kind of the initial shock factor that people have to, our worst nightmares in a way have to be played out first in order for them to kind of ease this in more and more. Obviously, these are very strong warnings, but how do you see that this is being played out in the mass media? Do you think that movies has a big role in this?
Absolutely. I mean, look back at the movie Tron that came out, like, what was that, 1982 or something? It was a Disney movie. It was about these characters go into a virtual world and they're basically end up fighting for their own survival. And they make interesting quotes in that movie about something about like the money and they're basically trying to live out their regular lives in this virtual world, and they're trying to keep up just like we do in our regular day lives, but the whole time it's just a virtual existence. It's not even real. So that's interesting.
Yes. So what would be the I can't remember if I asked you this last night or not, but what would be the kind of nightmare scenario for you that we might go into, or in the future years here? What do you see?
Well, integrating ourselves with technology and taking it to the point where technology basically overwhelms everything human, that we cease to be human. I mean, we hear this idea from the transhumanists that it's going to be humanity plus. See, that's their campaign now, is humanity plus. It's going to be humanity, but better, some extra add-ons. We're going to evolve. This is natural evolution, but I don't see it as natural evolution. I see it very dangerous. We have to listen to Aldous Huxley. I put that bit of Aldous Huxley talking at Berkeley in 1962 in the film. Mm-hmm. And he says flat out that, look, there's always been a controlling oligarchy, and this technology in the hands of that controlling oligarchy would give them total authority. I mean, they could basically have your mind. They would own your mind, especially if you're living in a virtual world. But even if you have a brain chip, I mean, think about how your brain can be affected by an electrode in your head. Your mood can be affected. Supposedly, all your thoughts could even be controlled at a certain point. You could become an automaton. That's a very real possibility.
Yes. Let's see, before we continue, I'm getting a very loud kind of noise in the background.
Yeah, there's a guy out here with a leaf blower. So
okay, no worries. Do you want to? So, Aaron, I want to ask you a little bit also about the other aspect to all of this. We've talked a little bit about some of the negative aspects and what basically some of the nightmare scenarios might be here. But I also want to ask you a little bit if you feel that it's something that it can be something good here, so to speak. And basically, I'd like to ask if you consider where you kind of draw the line, I guess, between, or when it comes to merging humans with technology. To make one example, if we take something like a pair of glasses, for instance, that's a technology in one sense to improve something on our body, to improve our eyesight and so forth. Do you think that's going too far, or where do you draw the line here, so to speak, Aaron?
Yes. These are the questions that you come up against over and over again when you go into this, and it's hard to say, definitely. I mean, where do you draw the line? We've come so far with technology, it's hard to think of going back now, and a lot of technology does help us out a good deal. I mean, it's hard to imagine life without it now. I think the best opportunity that all this brings forth to us is kind of giving us the chance to question how far we've come and what it is that we really want to do. Like, we've progressed this far, and now we've got all these things ahead of us that we could do, all these crazy possibilities, and we have the choice to decide our own fate, basically. Do we want to become cyborgs? Do we want to take on these transhumanist ideas, or do we completely abandon them? And is that feasible to abandon them? I like to think it is. I mean,
how about
it just seems.
I'll continue.
Yeah. No. Go ahead.
How about a let's say a pacemaker? This is one of these other kind of difficult areas as well, because that's really, it's invasive. You're putting something really into the body in that sense. Yet, apparently it helps many people to survive and keep their heartbeat going. Is that going too far? What do you think?
Oh boy, yeah. Now see, these are tough questions. These are, and it's a question that I have a tough time answering, in all honesty. I mean, they use a lot of the good aspects of this, like prosthetics for people who are quadriplegics and things like that. They use a lot of that to sort of
lower our guard.
Lower our guards and excuse a lot of the more invasive technologies like implantable microchips that have huge ramifications for personal liberty, which I can't see any excuse for that. I mean, we're losing too much freedom when it comes to that. Mm-hmm. And I hate to see these poor quadriplegic people being used as sort of just a mechanism to get that sort of thing into existence.
Yeah. No, it's I agree with you. It's very, very difficult. And I also guess on one regard, for me personally, I also feel very much that this should be an individual choice that we need to make. Because on one level, I consider that all these people that do want to go there, so to speak, and do want to go all the way, on one level, I think it's their right to actually do so as well. But again, yet the problem arises where, you know, if we end up in a situation where we in some way compete, so to speak, with these people, let's say they have cybernetic arms installed, whatever, they're stronger, faster, and all that stuff. We're going to be well left behind, for the lack of a better word. I don't know. Have you thought about that at all, Aaron? You know?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, the freedom to choose. Yeah, and then if these people are enhanced to a point where we are left behind, as you say, what kind of freedom of choice is left for the people who chose not to take on that technology in the first place? History is pretty humbling here to see what's happened to the people that have chosen not to go along with progress, as it were, and remain simple. And when you see what happens to those types of people, it's pretty humbling and disturbing, but it's a real reality, and it's something we need to all think of. This is definitely something we need to talk about.
Yeah. Well, exactly, because again, I mean, it's you can twist this around again, you know, back and forth all the time, and consider these things from a more philosophical viewpoint, I guess, as well. And one thing that I've been thinking about this idea of, you know, we have the intelligence, we have the means to do this. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, that just because you can do it doesn't mean that it's right to do it. But it seems to be very much the way things have been going. If we look back historically, that what we, you know, have been imagining and what we have been inspiring to, this is the kind of stuff that we actually have been able to progress to, or to achieve. And then I guess in the long run, we just have to see if that is something that actually is going to work or not. But I know that one thing that you discuss at the end of your film is this idea of what we might be losing here, or ending up leaving behind, so to speak, is our very humanity. Right, Aaron? Absolutely,
yeah. There's this idea of progress, and we all have this simplified view of what progress is. You know, history runs in a line. We used to be pioneers, and we've gained all these technologies to make the world a better place. But where is progress going? People sort of attack my videos, and they ask me, like, oh, well, you're against this technology. You must be against the Industrial Revolution. People like you're technophobes. Well, that's kind of a strange statement right there. I mean, the technical... wait a minute. The Industrial Revolution in and of itself wasn't a good thing. I mean, it was good in the idea of progress, but you're saying the Industrial Revolution's good. You have to say that chaining 12-year-old kids to machines for 18 hours a day, you're saying that that's good too. I mean, that came along with the Industrial Revolution. And this whole progress, you know, we're tied to the machine more and more until eventually we become the machine itself. And what is a machine? A machine isn't human at all. It's efficiency. It's pure efficiency. So is this the way that progress is taking us? Is it taking us from human sort of, and we know what the human experience is all about. We know that we're imperfect, and we have emotions and all these wonderful human things. When we merge ourselves with machines, I think that eventually you have to lose that thing, and do you just become a pure, efficient machine that's unfeeling and unconscious? Do you lose your consciousness itself? I mean, we all have our individual human consciousness. When does that get lost here in this process?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's a very, very important question. And also what you raise about the fact that this is, depending on who you are in all this, it can be good for you, so to speak. It all depends on where in the hierarchy you're at, basically. Because for some people, they might, have huge benefits from this kind of progress for various reasons, just like the industrial age or whatever. They end up in a situation where they don't have to work anymore, but someone else has to do it for them and all that stuff. So I guess that's also why we're kind of, we return to that question of the elite and try to incorporate that within our conversation here, because that is still something that probably is going to be still very much with us, so to speak, even if we go into this new future and a new humanity, that we might, the possibility here is that we might end up with a vastly technological superior elite, and then basically a more of a pawn, in this global society, basically. What do you think about that, Aaron?
Well, the British Ministry of Defense has stated itself that there will be a small super rich elite and a substantial class of slum and subsistence dwellers. That's everybody else. So they just come out and tell you that this is the way that things are going. And in that report, they say it will happen. See, they have different degrees of things that might happen, things that will probably happen, things that will happen. One of the things that will happen is that there will be a super rich elite and a substantial class of slum and subsistence dwellers. So there you go.
I'm also thinking of this report, or maybe it was more like just an article or news story a while back, where they also talked about the fact that they foresaw it might be the same one we're talking about here, but they foresaw the splitting of the human race. So basically, one tall, well-bred basically creature, and then a very small, dwarf-like human being at the side of this. You remember this article a while back?
The subspecies.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
There'll be the enhanced human that we're talking about as the transhumanist post-human ideal, this wonderful glowing creature of the future, and then there's just this little worker troll creature. I know Alex Jones talked about that in his Endgame film. He likes to mention that. I put that in my film too. The clip of him talking about that.
Yes, exactly. And it's a very real threat, as it were. And obviously one question that arises here is, okay, how do you stop something like this? How do you prevent this? So we're looking at a Unabomber style type counteraction here, or have you thought about like what do you consider that you should can do to work against something like this?
Boy, that's the big question right there. What do we do? I know that we got to do something. I know that, like I said over and over, that we have to have a dialogue about this stuff, because there's basically zero dialogue in the public now, and I see it creeping up because even in regular conversations with people will just bring up the idea of an implantable microchip, like without me even mentioning implantable microchip. I'll mention something like, Big Brother and technology is getting sort of invasive and we're losing our privacy. And they'll say, oh, yeah, the next thing is we're going to get a microchip implanted in our arm. And they just kind of like say it off the cuff and like it's the next thing. And I think we need to take a minute here and just stop and see where we are and say, well, now, wait a minute. What would I have said 10 years ago? I wouldn't even thought of saying anything about an implantable microchip. And how has this conversation evolved? Why has it evolved in this way? It's been pushed in this direction through mass media. I mean, these ideas they're in there heavy. We're not just talking about this for no reason.
And also the technology becomes more, it does become, or do become closer to us all the time. Just, think of some of the cell phones out there right now. We have, GPS, within the cell phones. There is very much of this track tracing. Everyone has a camera on themselves all the time, or surveillance and CCTV, and then the mass media on top of that, or even the entertainment media. So it becomes very prominent, and it becomes more and more part of our lives. And the question is, have we ever stopped before in history? When we stand at one of these cusps, have we ever stopped before? Probably not.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like we have, but I think the only option that we have here is to actually do that, if it's possible. We've become too acclimated to this, and once you understand just the way that just the way the world works right now, like money, where we are, the Federal Reserve, the way the media works, propaganda. I know there's more and more people questioning these things than ever, so that's good.
Yeah.
Will it be enough to turn around this huge tide of technological change? I don't know. I can't answer that. All I can say is that I hope that people at least question these things and take a look at them and maybe slow down for a minute.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the important thing is what you are doing. You're trying to bring focus to the topics and just start up the dialogue and make people become aware of these very troubling and difficult issues, because again it feels like we're moving more closer and closer to it all the time, so that the timing is obviously right to start the dialogue now. One thing I wanted to ask you a little bit about is regarding, let's say, transhumanism. Maybe if we can just define a little bit more of what we're talking about. I know that there's obviously different fields, for instance, within this. I'm thinking of, for instance, we can make one very clear division right at the get-go, and that's we can talk about genomics, for instance, or genetic manipulation. That's one aspect to all this, the biotechnology. Then we have the more technological aspect, talking about merging our biology with something mechanical or digital, like creating a cyborg. Is there any kind of big fields to the transhumanist movement that you feel we're missing if we just mention those two, or is that about it?
No. The fields are important, like you say, and as you said, there's biotechnology, and you also referred to information technology in there too. And then we have nanotechnology, and we have cognitive neuroscience. The cognitive end of this is one of the most interesting things, I think. But all these different areas, these specific specializations of science, come together, and that's what convergence is, into this singularity, this one single technology. See, the convergence into what they're going to become here. And so you have specialization in all these fields. They're all coming together, but it's all for one thing.
Mm-hmm. And you think that that's when we talk about the singularity, for instance, do you think that this will be at some point kind of centralized, the knowledge and the development and all this will be centralized under kind of one umbrella? Because on one level, I feel that we can actually tie this in together with the whole idea of one world government and one world currency. Mm-hmm. This is very much about the mono or the uni, bringing out of many one, basically, that whole ancient idea.
Oh yes, there can only be one, as there were.
Yes.
And yeah, you hear all the time that we need this world governing body to regulate this sort of thing. I mean, who's going to be in charge? This is going to change things so fundamentally. I mean, you're going to have certain countries competing with each other, and so what do you do to regulate this thing and see that the world's working on a level playing field? You hear these kinds of ideas all the time. You're always hearing about global government in these papers about this technology. I highly recommend reading a paper on cognitive neuroscience, for example. Google cognitive neuroscience, find a paper, and start reading it. And you will find some interesting things in that report. Or nanotechnology, or anything, biotechnology.
Yes.
Go for it.
We're at the cusp of something really scary when you begin to go into these fields and really study what is possible. It's kind of you get that kind of what do you call it?
Uh,
a thrill almost in one way, but it's very much, you're going down the roller coaster too fast. It's like, whoops, where is this going?
yes. Yes, well, the thrill is what they're hoping you feel like. Everybody has seen these comic book movies, everybody sees these superheroes, and now they want to be the superheroes.
Yeah.
And you look at those comic book movies; they're very interesting. They are talking about this science. They're talking about converging technology and transhumanism. You see these themes in the movies and the military-industrial complex, like Iron Man, the guy who's owns a military-industrial complex company, and he's building this mecha suit thing that they're actually working on now. They're working on these mech suits.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exoskeleton.
And the Hulk. Yeah, exoskeletons. Yeah, those are interesting, aren't they?
Very much so. So, I mean, there's many different areas that seems to come under one umbrella here, so to speak, and again, we have this idea of nanotechnology coming into this field, also very interesting, aspect to all of this. We have a possible AI or something kind of external overseeing this and an external intelligence. And I think, last night, just before our feed was broken, basically, or the computer froze up, I don't know if you heard that or not, but I asked you this, or basically made the point, and you can comment on it or if you want or not. And that was this idea that it seems to be almost that we're creating a god-like entity, actually, in one way, because this is going to be kind of an omnipotent being, an intelligence that is going to be able to oversee everything. We can even go back to that idea of the all-seeing eye in the sky, or the eye of providence, at the back of the dollar bill or what have you, that this is going to be a one singular presence that's going to oversee everything. And if we haven't, if we consider the idea that God is dead, as we talked about yesterday, then this idea is that we are now recreating that God that is dead. Any thoughts on that?
Now we're getting into the good stuff. Because, yeah, definitely. This is the really interesting aspect to all of this. And in the NBIC report that I mentioned, they say flat out that this is a new alchemy. They say that this is alchemy, what they're doing with this technology. Mm-hmm. And what is alchemy? It's the philosopher's stone. The philosopher's stone. Well, what is a stone? You think about what a stone is, that's a symbol. What's an obelisk? An obelisk is the stone. So see, it's the creative aspect of the male. It's the male creative aspect. And so the philosopher's stone, see God, how does God create? God doesn't create by, he doesn't create life by being two separate beings, like a man and a woman, and creating a new life. It can create by itself. Mm-hmm. God creates just by thinking of something. So see, the philosopher's stone is his mind. See, through the ultimate attainment of alchemy, one reaches godhood by being able to create outside of the sex act and being able to create with his mind. That's what the ultimate form of alchemy is, and creating this new golden man. You're talking about the golden man and a golden age. You're talking about the sun, and again, we're talking about Ra, the eye in the sky, the one God. And there you have it. Man's become a god on earth through alchemy.
Yes, absolutely. I think that this is a fascinating area with the idea, again, that you just have to think, basically, in that sense, to manifest something, that the technology will instantly kind of respond to your wishes, if you will, then. So we will become, in that sense, if this technology indeed will pan out, and if we indeed will end up at that position, we will become very much like creators. And again, we can go back to that from a philosophical point and think about it. Is that the point, maybe, of creation? Or do you think that this, I mean, because if we have this possibility, is it inherently wrong to do so, or is it just that do you think that we're just not ready to go there yet, or do you think that just you want to stay away from that altogether?
I don't think humanity will ever be ready to take on that kind of responsibility. When you get into becoming a god and taking creation into your own hands, boy, you are opening up a whole can of worms that I don't think is meant for humanity to ever open up. And this theme is everywhere. It's what reaching enlightenment is all about, really. The light of Lucifer, that's what it is. Becoming a god on earth. And no, I don't think it's right for anybody to do. And
do you think that that we will that civilization and will collapse before we reach such a point? Because that's possibly what I'm seeing here. In that sense, there's some kind of resonance that coming back from the more ancient world, where I feel at least that we have had a very high culture in that sense, but something happened back then. Even the Bible, if you want to get biblical on this thing, talked about that idea of one language, the Tower of Babel, etc., high culture, but then something happened there, and it feels to me that something like that might happen again in some sense. What do you think, Aaron?
Yeah, well, supposedly the old golden age, Atlantis or whatever, the Atlanteans, and you have all the mythology surrounding that, and this whole idea of reaching alchemy here with technology is the new Atlantis. We've heard this concept of the new Atlantis over and over again. Wasn't it Francis Bacon? Did he write the book, The New Atlantis?
Absolutely, yeah.
And it was about what happens when we go into this new golden age and we've attained these goals of reaching the highest form of alchemy that we can. That's an enlightened world, a world of logic and reason, a world where there's no more war. It's a utopia. And is it possible to actually get there? I don't think so. I don't think it's ever possible to have a perfect world. I don't see that. And I see the intentions here of the people who are bringing about this supposed utopia and their methods of doing it. And it makes you understand things at a really deep level. I'd encourage anybody to really take some time to introspect and understand what these things are that we're talking about here, because I can't convince anybody of my own opinion or to even understand these ideas. These ideas are they're amazing concepts, and if you take the time to actually think about them, it'll make a difference in your life. I know it has for me, and I just hope that other people can have that experience, because it's something amazing.
It is, absolutely. And this might be a good place here to take a little break, and I want to ask you if you want to continue talking a little bit more with us in the member section. What do you think, Aaron?
Yeah, I'd love to. That'd be great.
Because I do want to get into a little bit more, ask you a little bit about some of the mindset of some of these people that are striving for this particular technology and what might be behind that, so to speak, and also get into a little bit more other areas. We can talk a little bit more about the NICB report that we mentioned before, get into some of the more mechanics of this, so to speak, and see what we might be looking at here in the future years. But why don't you mention obviously the title of your film again, so people can do a search for it. If not, we're going to have this linked up on Red Eyes, of course. But the title of your film, and also mention your YouTube channel, or if there's any other websites out there that you want to give out, so people can look into this some more.
Yes, the title of the film is The Age of Transitions. It's available on Google Video, and you can download it there too. You can download it in low quality. I don't currently have a high-quality version available on the internet. I would like to make that available. I do have this in DVD quality, and I'm giving out the DVDs for free to people. This film, I intended it to be no profit. I'm not making any money on this film. I just want to put it out there. But I'm very open to working with other people, possibly setting up my own website or working with other people if they would want me to write reports up or write little pieces up. I've got tons of ideas in my head, or they want to work on a video together, get a hold of me. Go to my YouTube page. It's YouTube/ADDTV, and I also have MySpace and stuff like that. I'm sure that computer savvy people will be able to find that. I'll put a link on my YouTube page to that. And I really should get my own website going, but I don't at this point in time.
Okay, very good. But in the meantime, then go to youtube.com/ADDTV and do check out some of Aaron's films, and to get more, to, in a way, then I guess take our own I don't know what to call it, future in our own hands, so to speak.
Well, I mean, we have to take our future in our own hands, but I mean, this is taking things to an extreme, and yeah, this is definitely dangerous.
And
yes.
You know, if we talk a little bit about some of the background, you mentioned briefly eugenics, and you know, this is something you discuss in your film as well, that the background to all of this lies in eugenics. And would you also connect with this the theory of evolution? I know that these two has been linked, so to speak, in the past, and do you think that is what has created a philosophy like this, that there's no boundaries, basically, and we can, if we can do it, we're going to do it, right? Is that type of mentality here?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, like, if you can do it, then why not? That's basically the mindset here. And when you're talking about evolution, you're talking about survival of the fittest. And who are the fittest? And the fittest are the ones who are running everything. This is the philosophy that royals and people in power, the elite, this is the elite philosophy, that they are elite for a reason, and it's for a scientific reason. They got to the top because they are the fittest, and it's actually their obligation to us to see that society is run in the proper fashion. See, they're the administrators. They're the good shepherds that are steering us in the proper direction. And in their mind, if they weren't around, we wouldn't know what to do with ourselves, because we're just all chaotic, and we don't...
Possibility of life extension. And he also mentioned this fact that if you choose to live, I guess, a certain amount of years above the norm, then I guess we can say you have to simply choose at that point not to have any kids. So the world doesn't, as you say, you know, if we have a huge number of people on the planet, the question obviously arises, you know, is that going to be sustainable? Is that even going to work? There's a whole lot of back and forth on that. But what do you see is the most kind of, I guess, dangerous aspect to all of this? Is it you know, is it in relation to the human soul, that we will lose a little bit of ourselves if we live forever? Or is this a more practical issue that we can't be, you know, so many people on the planet? Or do you see something else as a big danger here?
Well, yeah, all this stuff is inherent. I mean, it's just the problem. When you build up this technological civilization, these are the problems that just inherently happen. And when it's basically man wanting to become a god and create the world the way that he sees fit. The idea of God being dead, so this is interesting philosophy that quite a few people adhere to, and then you believe God is dead, so man is a god. So he has the ability to create the world in the way that he wishes, and through technology he can actually become what he wants to be, and he himself becomes a god by becoming a creator himself and creating man into this new post-human ideal.
And is that a big danger as you see it? And if so, is that primarily because we lack the morals, or do you just think it's wrong?
Concept right there.
Yes. So so tell us a little bit about you know, some of your background, I guess, and how you kind of got interested, I guess, in some of these topics. It's always interesting to hear how people kind of get into it, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I'm just kind of a regular person. I was born in rural Pennsylvania. I went out to school for to learn video in Columbus, Ohio. And while I was out there, my junior year, 9/11 happened, and I was in video class that day. Actually, I think it was video 3 class, working on a video project. And everybody remembers that day and how surreal it was. It was the same for me. We were sitting around a TV, and I didn't really know what to think. And I didn't know what to think for years after that, actually. I was just kind of like in a daze. I was working hard while I was in school. I wasn't even really on the internet at all. And then quite a few years later, a good friend of mine came up to me and introduced me to Alex Jones and those sort of things. I started looking into 9/11 truth, and I realized the reality of 9/11 truth and all the bigger concepts that stem out from honest investigation, truth-seeking. And early on, I came across transhumanism. Like, when I first started looking into the 9/11 thing, I kind of came across transhumanism while I was just searching on the internet for stuff. I just kind of, like, by accident, I guess you would say, but I wouldn't say it is by accident. And I realized I knew about the population reduction things from listening to Alex Jones and whatnot, and then the transhumanists were talking about life extension. And that made me think, I'm like, well, how does this life extension kind of jive with the idea of population reduction? Because there's an obvious conflict of interest right there. So that got me thinking. And I ended up making some videos probably about 2 years after I was into all this truth-seeking. I started making some short videos that are up on YouTube now about transhumanism. And here we are today. I finally made this full-length feature, or I guess it's not, it's just a 1-hour documentary, really. It could be a TV program because it's a 1 hour long. Mm-hmm. And it's just an attempt to, because the discussion on transhumanism, in my mind, is it's always lacking. It's always too one-sided. People are too general. They're not understanding where transhumanism came from, like what the word actually means, who made the word, where it came out of, because it came out of eugenics. Julian Huxley came up with the word itself, and that's often neglected. People just get caught up in this idea of, oh, we're going to turn into super intelligent cyborgs. We're going to have this technological utopia. We're going to live forever. Oh, boy, it's going to be great. But nobody, I mean, with that sort of thing, you just don't get utopia that easy. It doesn't. It comes with consequences.
Of course.
You can't have life extension. Life extension requires some sort of regulatory thing, because if everybody's living forever now, which they say that they can do, that living forever is a real possibility. So you have to regulate reproduction then. And when you understand that, that goes right in with all this population control stuff and the United Nations Agenda 21, things of this nature.
So, and what do you, I've heard, I think it is already great talking about some of the, as he described it, problems that comes along with the.
Thank you very much, Henrik, for having me on here. It's an honor to be on here. Thank you.
As I mentioned there, The Age of Transitions, that's a film you've recently done and released on the web. And by the way, for everyone who wants to find out a bit more about Aaron, you can go to his YouTube profile where you can see a bit more of his audio clips and so forth. He doesn't have a complete website out there yet, but go to his YouTube account, simply youtube.com/ADDTV or ADTV, and check out some of the clips and so forth he has up there. And I think the entire film is available also on YouTube. Is that correct, Aaron?
Yes, yeah, it's in 9 parts on YouTube, and the entire thing's on Google.
Excellent. And, so obviously there's a whole lot of topics to talk about here today, but for, let's say for people that haven't seen the film yet and are listening here today, the concept, I guess, of the age of transitions, maybe you can just briefly tell us about that.
Well, the age of transitions, the title itself really says it all. We're going into a time where the human race itself is going through massive changes, or is going to be going through massive changes. You've got transition and transhuman. You're talking about transforming, going through a transition, transmutation. So you're talking about the change from human to post-human, which is this idea of creating cyborgs, adding different sort of technologies like brain chips, artificial intelligence, life extension, all these converging technologies, and what they mean to what it will be to be human here in this new world we're going into after the transitional phase, when we're into the new age, the new golden age, as it were. Or that's what we're being told it is. It's a golden age, and the human being is being transmuted, which is an interesting